Excellencies, distinguished representatives, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Asia-Pacific commemoration of International Women's Day. It's great to have you all here representing so overwhelmingly and also recognizing the significance of this day. This morning, as I was coming out here, I was looking at the Secretary General's message, and I would very much encourage you to look at his message. United Nations can be proud of itself. United Nations, under the leadership of Secretary General, has been able to achieve a fair degree of progress internally within United Nations to enhance representation of senior leadership in UN. It's pretty overwhelming, the progress that has been made, and I personally also owe thanks to the Secretary General for his leadership. Every year in our compact, we have to commit ourselves to meet the targets of gender parity. As of December 2015, we have surpassed our 50-50 gender balance goal in ESCAP in locally recruited position with 65% females and 35% males. We are approaching gender equality in the P2 and P3 levels with averages of 44% females versus 56% male. Our ratios are somewhat lower for P4 and P5 levels, but I can tell you that I am striving pretty hard to raise these. Compared to a year ago, the largest improvement was made at the senior D1 level, where there was an increase of 15%. We have 53% females as of 31st December 2015, compared to 38% females as at 31st December 2014. The reason why I'm recounting these numbers is that the first task we have at hand is to make sure we do our job to ensure that at least in our own limited domain and horizon, we are able to show some results to the rest of the world. Asia Pacific is a very large region, and ESCAP's affiliation with Asia Pacific has been remarkable on all fronts, and this has been an overwhelming area for us. And I thank all our directors to make it possible to achieve better ratios. I have to report that today in our transport division, in our macroeconomic policy division, we have started to induct women relative to 0 women in those 2 divisions. So it is very enlightening to me that with strong determination, political leadership that you saw, and strategic thinking, outreach, we can achieve the desired results. So at this moment, all I can say, let's celebrate the progress we have made in advancing gender equality, but more importantly, it is time for action to close the critical gender gaps that remain. Since 2006, another 250 million women have entered the global labor force. And a recent McKinsey study has found that by advancing women's equality, up to 12 trillion could be added to global GDP by 2025. So even with this information, I'm perplexed why the average annual pay for women today equals the average that men were earning 10 years ago. Why can't we get this right? Women across Asia and Pacific today earn on an average 20% less than men. While our region has closed more than 2/3 of its gender gap, it still ranks second from the bottom in women's economic participation and opportunity, political empowerment, education, health, and survival. I'm a person who believes in numbers, and the numbers do show mixed results. And in some areas, they are not very impressive. In Asia and the Pacific, gender gaps in economic participation have barely changed for more than 20 years, with the gap at nearly 50% in the South Asia sub-region. Although the countries of Asia and the Pacific, compared with other regions, have shown the greatest improvement in women's political empowerment over the past decade, average female representation in Asian national parliaments is still only 19%, significantly lower than the global average of 23%. In the Pacific, the rate is lower, still just 13%. And I don't think there is any female leader of the small island developing states that ESCAP is a member, that are affiliated with ESCAP. Gender-based violence remains a reality across all subregions. Between 25 and 70% of women and girls facing violence at the hands of an intimate partner. This has severe consequences, not only for women and their families, but also carries economic and social cost. These entrenched inequalities are a matter of concern for two main reasons. They undermine women's fundamental rights and they hold back sustainable development and the achievement of prosperity and well-being for all. This is why a specific sustainable development goal has been dedicated to gender equality and women's empowerment in the new 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And this will also be a key element of our deliberations at the 2016 Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development from 3rd to the 5th of April. How do we move forward to achieve this? I'm sure you all are struggling with this question. To break through barriers, we must go beyond boundaries, generate new ideas, be aggressive, take bold actions and steps. I would like to focus today on two key enablers: finance and technology for gender equality and women's empowerment. First, a word on the resources themselves. Increasing the resources and strengthening of governance of gender equality and women's empowerment has to be the integral element where we try to work very hard for the implementation of the SDGs. A 2014 survey of Asia-Pacific governments revealed that across 17 countries, annual funding in support of gender equality and women's empowerment ranged from just 0.003%. Imagine what this is, 0.003% to 3% of national budgets, the highest achievement. For 15 of these 17 countries, the national budget allocation to gender was less than 1%. Women are 50% or so of the population. This is clearly insufficient if we are to achieve the SDG targets. Lots of innovations are going on. Yesterday we were holding an STI advisory board meeting, and there was a very impressive lady from Bangladesh who talked about social innovation, where impact funds, investments are being used to promote the cause of the women. But these are really isolated examples. They are good, but are they going to achieve scale? No, we need scalability in this area. So this is why gender concerns are now being integrated in ESCAP's policy advocacy on public financial resource management, which means, of course, we will work on domestic resource mobilization through the window of tax reform. But we have to start participating in where the money is being invested, both in the public and private sector. To the extent it's public sector, it's called public financial resource management. So I think UN system that's represented here will be working with us quite closely in implementing the SDGs, and this is one of the areas that we'd like to work unitedly as one UN. Last April, ESCAP, together with Government of Indonesia, convened the first Asia-Pacific high-level consultation on financing for development. One of the priorities identified was ensuring that new financing for development framework contributes to one of the priorities identified was ensuring that the new financing for development framework contributes to higher living standards, creates decent jobs, and empowers women and girls in our region. It is also recommended mainstreaming gender consideration into national budgetary processes. These deliberations will be continued at the end of this month in the Republic of Korea when ESCAP hosts the third Asia-Pacific consultation on financing for development with a focus on tax reform, strengthening regional capital markets, infrastructure financing, as well as financial inclusion that has to exclusively service women, if I had my way. But we must look beyond government resources alone to other financing mechanisms. I'm pleased to note that leading financial institutions, and one of the examples that I quoted earlier, are increasingly engaged in social impact investing, contributing to greater gender equality. Lack of access to financial services and productive assets makes it difficult for women to start businesses or invest in education, further entrenching the cycle of inequality. Around the world, the gender gap in financial inclusion is not significantly narrowing, with only 58% of women compared to 65% of men owning bank accounts. In South Asia, the situation is somewhat dismal. Only 1 in 3 women have a bank account. The SDG Financial Services Industry Matrix produced by the United Nations Global Compact and KPMG offers a number of good examples of how private sector partners are increasingly leading in women's empowerment and enhancing financial inclusion. Harnessing information, communications, and technology is also vital for women's empowerment to enhance access to markets and services. Yet across 11 low and middle income countries in our region, women are 14% less likely to own a mobile phone than men, a gap which increases to 38% in South Asia. In East Asia and Pacific, 54% of women remain unconnected. In this regard, I'm pleased to inform you that ESCAP will soon launch a new regional program, our Women and ICT Frontier Initiative, to support women's access to technology and to build their skills to start and expand their businesses. I owe special thanks to one of our regional institutes in Incheon to make this possible. Let me take a few minutes to talk about gender equality and the SDGs. For the 2030 Agenda to succeed, we must root out the causes of inequality between women and men. This means addressing unequal gender relations and power imbalances. It means tackling structural barriers such as discriminatory legislation and macroeconomic policies, prejudicial social norms, and harmful practices. This means placing all women and girls at the center of the 2030 agenda, but requires a specific focus on those who are most frequently excluded, including women and girls with disabilities, those living in rural poverty, those who are members of ethnic minorities. It was heartening that at this SDG summit in September last year, 19 heads of state from the Asia-Pacific region pledged to take bold measures to step it up for gender equality, which is the theme of our event here today. Stepping it up means focusing on women and girls in education, economic empowerment, political participation, and addressing violence against women. International Women's Day should be marked by a pledge of parity to ramp up the ambition of our vision and accelerate the urgency of our actions on gender equality and women's empowerment. ESCAP stands ready to partner with you to these ends. The future we want demands this of us, and I thank you all for being here to celebrate this particular day, but hope that the messages that we have echoed, not only in my presentation, but in other colleagues' presentation, will be lived up to as we further progress on the gender issue. Thank you for being here.